This is the world's largest stock exchange building in New York City. This is the building that gave birth to America's worst economic crisis 100 years ago, a crisis in which millions of people became unemployed and the whole of America was engulfed in poverty. People were ready to sell themselves. To get out of this Great Depression, America needed a messiah. Did they find this messiah? Why did America have to ban alcohol? And how did this ban make the mafias powerful there? And who is this Robin Hood of doubts whose stories are still famous there? I am Faisal Warage, and in the first episode of the series History of America Season 3, we will show you all this. In 1918, America had won the First World War. When the soldiers who had lost the war returned to their country, they got breaking news that alcohol was banned in America. The 18th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution forbade the preparation, transportation, import, and sale of alcohol. This amendment was legally passed on January 16, 1919. As soon as the 18th Amendment was passed, alcohol stored in bars began to be wasted. Many clubs and shops put up boards that alcohol is not available here. Those who like to buy alcohol should stay out of it. Alcohol was not banned in a business country like America. For this, a movement was going on since the 19th century. In this movement, two major organizations, the Women's Christian Union and the Anti-Salon League, were present. Other women's organizations were also promoting the ban on alcohol. The reason for the opposition of drinking alcohol was that men come home drunk. They rape their wives and children. They spend their hard-earned money on alcohol and become poor. Then they commit crimes. They are fed up with the difficulties of life and commit suicide. During all this, their wives and children are ruined. On the other hand, the men who make and sell alcohol are getting rich by eating the earnings of the poor. These were their arguments. The posters designed for alcohol prohibition were shown in them. It was shown that women and children were demanding alcohol prohibition. But the man who made alcohol said, "Support alcohol so that my safe is full." Such posters were also designed in which women were shown attacking bars. As shown in this poster, women are crushing the drums of alcohol in the form of Crusader Knights. In this other poster, a woman is breaking a bottle of alcohol with a hammer. It was also shown that alcohol was banned in many states since the 19th century. For example, in 1855, the state of Illinois imposed alcohol prohibition. President Abraham Lincoln was also among those who supported this prohibition. We have also made a great documentary on his life on DSJ. These organizations and people who have been campaigning against alcohol since the last century, they were also active during the First World War. They ran a lot of campaigns. Demonstrations were held all over America. The slogan of the time was, "Vote dry." That is, vote for alcohol prohibition. The 18th Amendment was passed because of this campaign. In this campaign, alcohol consumption was banned on every occasion except religious events. A special agency was established on these restrictions, the Bureau of Prohibition. This agency carried out actions against alcohol consumers. They caught a large number of alcohol and poured it into the potholes. But there was a problem with this. That is, the supporters of alcohol prohibition hoped that the conditions of the country and the United States would improve, and there would be fewer crimes. But the opposite happened. The underground network of preparation and sale of alcohol came into being. This network was now controlled by the mafias. Then gang wars also started to control the business of alcohol in the mafia gangs. These fights were called beer wars. Beer is also a light-flavored type of alcohol. So in these beer wars, underground wars gave birth to many mafia dons. The most famous of these dons was Scarface. That is, Al Capone. Scarface, Italian-American don. Al Capone was such a nickname that could only be said behind his back. No one dared to say that in front of him. The reason for this name was that he had long knife marks on his left cheek. Al Capone was born in a very poor neighborhood in New York in 1899. In 1919, the year when alcohol was banned in America, Al Capone also moved to Chicago. He made rapid progress in the world of crime. He founded the most powerful gang in Chicago, the Chicago Outfit. Through this gang, Al Capone took over the business of alcohol in Chicago. During this time, whoever came in his way, Al Capone kept crushing them mercilessly. On Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1929, Al Capone's accomplices killed 7 people in the guise of the police. The killers were never caught. Al Capone had so much influence in Chicago that government officials and politicians also supported him. Even the mayor of Chicago, William Thompson, was loyal to him. Al Capone used to say that when he came to Chicago, he had only $40 in his pocket. And then this was the city where he earned $5 million annually. He became the sole owner of hundreds of clubs and wineries. Al Capone was also a charitable person. He built free kitchens for poor people where they were given free food. Because of these charitable deeds, people sometimes call him the Robin Hood of Chicago. In the heyday of Al Capone, the ban on alcohol practically made the entire American society corrupt. Even the White House was not safe from it. President Vaughn G. Harding, who was the President of the United States from 1921 to 1923, was a big fan of alcohol. Therefore, the government agencies that confiscated alcohol served it openly in the White House offices. Apart from corruption and gang wars, America was also suffering from a huge loss. Some businessmen started selling non-standard alcohol. Due to this, the health of the drinkers was deteriorating. In these circumstances, America began to think, why not end the ban on alcohol? Why not regulate it? A few years ago, people were campaigning to end the ban on alcohol. Now new play cards have been picked up on the streets. These play cards said, we want beer, we want alcohol. Even women, who proudly broke the drums of alcohol, were campaigning to continue the alcohol ban. Some people were also arguing that legalizing alcohol would give the government tax, and people would get jobs, and America would progress. But before the decision to ban alcohol was taken again, Al Capone's downfall began. Surprisingly, this downfall was not done by the police, but by lawyers. Al Capone was enjoying a luxurious lifestyle, but his tax was not balanced by this lifestyle. So Al Capone's lifestyle was put forward, and a case of tax evasion was filed against him. After a long court process, Al Capone was sentenced to 11 years in prison in 1931, but he could not fulfill the sentence. A few years later, in 1939, he was released on medical basis. After his release, he went to his mansion on Palm Island near Miami Beach, and he spent the rest of his life there. He died in 1947. After Al Capone, the gang war decreased, but the power of the underground mafias remained the same. How was this mafia dismantled? You should definitely watch our video on this topic. Friends, during the massive campaign to end alcohol prohibition, another problem came to America. This problem was the Great Depression. This problem made millions of Americans poor overnight. How did this period of hunger and poverty come to America? And how did this period end? Before the First World War, the stock market was considered to be the business of a few rich people. But after the war, the situation changed. President Charles Mitchell of the New York City Bank thought, why don't ordinary people invest in stocks? They should also invest. If they invest, the profit will increase manifold. So they established broker offices all over America. Ordinary people could invest in the stock market through these offices. After Charles Mitchell's death, more brokers came into the market. With his efforts, tens of thousands of people invested in the stock market. People even took out loans to buy shares. It became such a profitable business that even shoe polishers, newspaper sellers, and office boys invested in stocks. To keep the public informed about the stock market, sticker tapes were installed all over the country. This was a telegraph machine invented by the famous scientist Thomas Edison. This machine produced a tape-like print with the prices of the shares written on it. These machines were updated every 4 hours. According to this, people call their brokers to make new deals and earn profits. John F. Kennedy's father, Joseph Kennedy, was also among those who made money from stocks. It had become a gold rush. Everyone wanted to get into it. Seeing the greed of the public, experts had also started warning them. A big investor, Paul Warburg, had proposed that if investment in the stock market continues like this, there will be a big upheaval. However, investors who wanted to get rich overnight ignored this warning. As a result, investment in stocks continued to increase. And there came a time when the market was overloaded. That is, Old shares were being traded in the market, and new ones were not coming. Because of this, the prices of shares started to fall. Thus, the collapse of the stock market began. Clever investors ran away in the beginning. The stock market has now reached its peak. Now it has crashed. So they withdrew their capital on time. Joseph Kennedy was also among these smart people. People's sudden withdrawal of capital created an unbelievable situation. And in October 1929, the market began to crash. In American stock history, 24th and October 29th are remembered by the names of Black Thursday and Black Tuesday, because these were the 2 days in which the American stock market was completely crashing. In particular, on October 29th, the market's Diwali was over. On that day, thousands of American citizens, whose capital was at stake, gathered outside the market. They were shocked to hear the news of the stock market crash. No one could have stopped this crowd from attacking the stock market if the police had not reached there in time. The public was completely dispersed after seeing the police. But on that day, millions of Americans had lost all their earnings. An American comedian, Groucho Marx, and future British Prime Minister Winston Churchill's heavy investment was also lost. In the last week of October, the American stock market had to suffer a loss of $25 billion. As soon as the stock market crashed, the public lost confidence in the financial system. People rushed out of the banks and tried to get their capital out of cash so that it would not be wasted. But where did the banks have so much money in cash? As soon as the banks were closed, the banks were empty of capital. By 1931, 3,000 American banks were closed. With the closure of the banks, the entire system of investment and interest stopped. In America, business started with loans from banks. Banks used to run their business with interest on loans. With the closure of the banks, the business began to shut down. The workers also became unemployed. In the early 1930s, there were no rains. As a result, crops grew very little. At one point, 25% of America's population became unemployed. This was the time when 200,000 people in America were hungry. People who were tired of poverty were forced to sell their valuables. Take a look at this picture. A famous broker has written on the car, "Give me $100 and buy this car." He also wrote that he had lost everything in the stock market. Poverty had also made many people homeless in America. These unemployed people started selling things on the streets. Even innocent children were protesting to give jobs to their fathers. Some unemployed people used to hang their CVs with their coats. Once 2,000 jobs were announced in the state of Ohio, 5,000 unemployed people came to give interviews. This is another picture of that time. A woman is worried about her 2 children. This picture shows the total worry and despair of American society at that time. In these circumstances, President Herbert Hoover, who was elected president in 1929, became unacceptable. America needed a new leader. This new leader was Franklin D. Roosevelt. In 1932, the new Democratic presidential candidate Franklin D. Roosevelt came to power. He was the governor of New York. He was a husband of former President Theodore Roosevelt's niece, Eleanor. Due to polio, his lower body was paralyzed. He continued his presidency with the help of wheelchairs. Roosevelt ran his election campaign on 2 things. First, he wanted to improve the economy of the economy. Second, he wanted to end the ban on alcohol. This campaign was successful. In the presidential elections in November 1932, Roosevelt won 42 states and achieved a landslide victory. The new president took office on March 4th, 1933. In his first speech, he announced that he would make strict restrictions on banking, credit, and the investment system. He called this financial reform a New Deal. He faced many challenges to achieve this. The first big challenge was how to restore public trust in the American banking system. 3 days after becoming president, President Roosevelt ordered all banks to close for a few days. On March 9th, the president passed the Emergency Banking Act. It was decided that any bank that faced financial difficulties would be given money from the government treasury. Banks would be able to return the money to their account holders. That is, the public's money would be safe in the banks. This government guarantee increased public confidence. On March 13th, When the bank reopened, people lined up to collect money from the banks again. As soon as the $1 billion capital returned to banks, the business of the banks resumed. Banks began to issue loans, and the economic downturn continued. The president established the Securities and Exchange Commission and regulated the stock exchange. Now, the government could avoid this crisis by intervening in the market at any time. After regulating the banking system and the stock market, the president paid attention to unemployment. He started giving money to state governments for development work. With this money, the government started working on many projects, including roads, railways, schools, and dams. Tens of thousands of unemployed people were hired for these projects. In addition, a permanent government organization of laborers, the Sunni Conservation Corps, was formed. In short, it was called the CCC. According to this plan, 300,000 young laborers were placed on permanent government payroll. These people worked on government projects and received a salary of $25 per month. During the 10-year period of Roosevelt's government, $7 billion was spent on development projects. The faces of the four most acclaimed presidents of American history were made on Mount Rushmore in South Dakota. These are the faces of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. This project was completed in the era of Franklin D. Roosevelt, so that the United States does not forget its great leaders. The Grand Coulee Dam was built on the Columbia River in the state of Washington. It is still one of the largest dams in the United States. Electricity was also generated from these dams. The water problem was also solved for agriculture. This improved the production of crops. Roosevelt also increased the wages of factory workers. He also gave securities to those who took loans. He also started a series of medical insurances for the common people. In addition, the Social Security Act was passed. The financial aid of the old, the unemployed, and the poor was also started. President Roosevelt also abolished the ban on alcohol. Roosevelt's argument was that legal preparation for alcohol would lead to heavy taxes. In this way, the budget loss and the deficit would also be reduced. Therefore, the 21st Amendment was adopted. Under this, the ban on alcohol, i.e., the 18th Amendment, was abolished. Preparation and sale of alcohol in the United States was once again allowed. This was the first time in American history that a law was completely reversed. At the end of the ban, the Americans celebrated. It was written on the bars, "Farewell 18th Amendment," "Khuda Hafiz 18th Amendment." Especially the younger generation partied a lot at the end of this ban. They raised interesting slogans. For example, "We want whiskey." We danced on the tables. President Roosevelt also broke an important legal tradition with the 18th Amendment. There was a tradition in the United States since the time of George Washington. The American president was elected twice. No candidate was elected for the third time, but Roosevelt broke this tradition. From 1932 to 1944, the American president was elected 4 times in a row. In 1951, the 22nd Amendment banned any president from going beyond 2 terms. In 1941, the United States was completely out of the Great Depression, but the reality was that Uncle Sam was going from one trouble to another. In 1939, the Second World War had begun in Europe. President Roosevelt had kept the United States out of this war, but he was taking some steps that were dragging the United States towards this war. Wait for next episode. Take care.